access at home to the internet or a laptop. I don't know if anyone has an idea, and or if we should be doing some kind of like trying to get a sense of what those numbers are so we can do some group advocacy to get maybe those things to DC students. But I'm at a loss on this topic, to be honest. I feel like I'm just starting to learn and figure it out.
I just wanted to jump in. Thank you for bringing up particularly live captioning and working with people who are deaf or hard of hearing. And it's funny because it's actually something I just came across on social media today, how the coronavirus is affecting people with visual or hearing impairments, because touch is a big sensory device that they have to use, especially if you're visually impaired. So how that is affecting them when now you kind of live in this world where you can't touch anything. Regarding live captioning, I'm wondering if Gallaudet would have any resources, since they are like the largest school for people with hearing impairments. So maybe we could do some digging. I know there was a time where in a field trip last year, there was a student who was deaf, and we explored getting an ASL interpreter, and they were actually pretty responsive, but it ended up not, I think something happened with the field trip itself and we ended up not needing it, but they were really responsive and it seemed like they had resources. So that might be a good that might be a good resource to connect with, since that's a population that they serve. But I think this conversation, yeah. Oh, you can go. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I would say I'm going to post the article, because the article gave a big list of lots of platforms that have the live captioning option, and it's just a matter of thinking about it and turning it on. Even like Facebook Teams and things, some of these platforms that we've all jumped to have that. So I guess I'm just trying to be more mindful of not only economic barriers, but ability barriers.
Thanks for sharing out. And yeah, I think the digital divide is this, it's this issue that we obviously recognize, but as a community, I think it's probably one of the most difficult aspects to address, because every student's resources look different. Every student has a completely different experience. Their home situation looks different. I'd be interested to hear if anyone else is having similar feelings about the digital divide, if they found maybe ways to work around it, or just any challenges that you're having regarding the digital divide, and how we can be aware and maybe start to address these things.
It's a hard question, and I think we are all struggling really with it so much. But I would say that sometimes it's important to remember that less is more, in the sense that we are thinking of all these things that we want to give, because we know in the world prior to this, things that we have already struggled to even serve or bridge that divide. And maybe we need just to step out a little bit and rethink of what is already there that we can highlight that is of strength. Anyway, that's what my principal always says, and I always find it's a great advice when I feel overwhelmed with all these things that I don't know where to set my foot firm in the ground. Less is more, and where is that less that is really more?
So for those who don't know me, I'm John Paul Hayworth. I'm the executive director of the State Board of Education. And we had our public meeting this week, and we had the Deputy Mayor for Education in to talk to us about the COVID response and all of the things. And it was a really fascinating conversation for a lot of reasons. But I mean, the technology divide that we're talking about, especially in terms of equity, is something that the board is very concerned about. And trying to grapple with. And I think one of the things that I mean, to be frank, I think one of the things that we have not heard from the administration, any political administration, is that like, we're not going to be able to solve this. Like, and we are not educating children well during distance learning. Like, it is not education in the way that we had expected it in a regular school year. And I think it is really hard for any of us who are somewhat used to our places of privilege in being able to make change to understand that we can't do that right now. And I think that's one of the challenges that we're all facing too, is like, we all want to fix all of these problems that we are seeing and know exist, and can't. And that is really hard to live with because we are all very active people that want to help and assist and change lives for children, and that is really hard. But for this particular topic of what I'm thinking about is two things. One, it is a huge issue now, and there are still students in DC that we don't know where they are, and schools can't find them and haven't been in contact with them for 5 weeks. And so that's challenging in all things, right? Like, this is just challenging. So, you know, we're still getting calls from parents who don't know that there are distance learning like available for their students. And so there are some fundamental just issues with how we communicate with parents and how we think about bringing in all of the community into those types of things, that we're seeing all of these enormous holes in how we are approaching things that we thought we were doing pretty good at, right? And I think one of the things that I am very focused on right now is that equity piece of like, how are we, when we go back to school, whenever that is, how are, whatever that's going to look like, right? Because it's going to look different than what our sort of normal was. We're not going back to normal, right? So even if we were to start again in the fall with regular classes, the likelihood is that at some point there's going to be a new wave of coronavirus, and it's very possible that we may have to shut down individual schools for particular amounts of time for quarantine of that school population to help, so that it doesn't spread throughout the community. And what does that look like? How do we help that school community? And I think the technology pieces are something that I think everyone is really thinking about in terms of, I know PCSB has been in direct conversations with some of the major providers of Comcast and Verizon and all those folks to try to get additional connectivity. Comcast has finally waived their requirement that you have to be good on all your bills in order to get service during this emergency, which is fantastic. But there's a number of other things that are still going on. I mean, if you are in a household with more than one student, you need to have more than one device sometimes, but you might not. And what is your Wi-Fi like to connect to 3 or 4 different devices? And how do you do? I mean, these are all questions that frankly, like, the fact that we're now asking those questions, like just 4 weeks or 5 weeks into this process, is pretty good, right? Like, the fact that we have all of this done in a way that a majority of our students have access to something, right? Whether that's a packet, whether that's a technology device, something like that. And I think it is. I think we can learn from a number of people who do this regularly. Like Friendship, has a Friendship online school, and so they have some answers to some of these questions about how do you provide good education through technology in a way that is different. I mean, there's a number of examples all over the country, and I don't mean to go on and on, but I think one of the things that you are absolutely right, and thank you so much, Clarissa and Vanessa, for talking about that article. I honestly, I click the button in our WebEx when we're doing a public meeting for closed captioning, but I had never really thought about how does it actually work for the community. And so I'm going to take that back to my team and make sure that for all of our next meetings, we are very conscious of that type of thing, because honestly, it's one of the things that I didn't think about. And now I feel horrible that I hadn't thought about it. So I don't know. I'm trying to be positive, but also like there's a lot. And so
Yeah.
I think you're right in like, we need to also step back and realize the successes that we've had, but also, yes, we need to focus on making sure that we are doing better, but there's a lot that we're not going to be able to do.
I appreciate that, and I've certainly been sitting with that a lot lately. I'm curious if you or DC or I'm curious for percentages is the first thing I'm curious about. Like, do we have percentages? Are there percentages, or is somebody trying to calculate them beyond just every organization or school? How many kids don't have access to the internet or don't have multiple devices? Because I can't give up I can't let go of my optimism and my wanting to try to do something. The thing that keeps coming to my mind is, I bet we could organize some kind of device drive. I just think of, the needing more than one laptop in a household is something that I feel like that's more solvable to some degree. Like if it was a citywide, anyone who can donate an old device. I mean, we have like 3 or 4 old laptops around here. Could we donate them to a family who needs more than one, who needs a device? And there was some way to organize something like that. But that's bigger than any one of us. But
yeah, I think the challenge is that is being done largely at the LEA level, at the school level, rather than sort of citywide. I know that I think one of the things that I would suggest maybe is connecting with, and I'm going to forget their name, the organization that's doing the grant work through the Deputy Mayor of Education's office. Is it Ed Forward that's helping with that? I don't remember their name. I can't believe that. So the mayor announced a couple weeks ago that there was a new sort of funding mechanism that she had put together for, I think, technology type stuff, but I can't remember.
Oh, yeah, John Paul, that's right. The DC Education Fund.
That's the one.
Yeah,
thank you.
They would be focusing currently on securing funding to get those devices in the hands of all the students. And also someone mentioned in the chat too, and Mary Lambert had shared with us a couple weeks ago that laptops or I believe it was Chromebooks, I can't remember exactly what it was, that were already scheduled to go to, I think, like grades 3, 6, and 9, that they were looking to accelerate that distribution, but I don't know where they are with it. But then John Paul, you raised such a critical point that there's so many students that are just missing right now that they haven't been able to reach.
Yeah,
so,
and DCPS, I know, had focused on making sure that devices were going to high school students, and then we're going to come down, like sort of go down the role. But I mean, we don't have connectivity for one-to-one. And then beyond the fact that just students need them, we also need to be sure that teachers have them, right? And have access to all of the things that they need to be able to do that type of thing. And you're assuming a heck of a lot from amazing teachers, right? That they can actually work with these technologies as well as we sort of expect our students to be able to do. Anyway, sorry.
Good morning, everyone. This is Karen, and you brought up so many points, John Paul and Vanessa. Thank you. I had a question, and I still need to explore this for myself. I'm not clear on, and this is going, my question's going to go towards the missing children, or the children we haven't reached. I don't want to say missing yet, but children we haven't reached. Is the Fox TV program, will it go to homes that don't have cable? Is it a satellite channel? Yes.
So the district knowledge network, I think, is where they're broadcasting a lot of these lessons, and that is a public access thing. So you get it just on your regular antenna type thing. You don't need cable. You don't need, I mean, it's literally, you plug in your TV and it'll pop up on your thing on channel 16. Is that right? 13? One of the 13, 16, or 99 are the DC channels, and I can never remember which one is which.
Okay, that helps. And I wonder if the other bigger channels like ABC, NBC, CBS could have a PSA saying, go to these DC channels, because I don't know if all families in DC know about this. I've lived here for a long time and I don't watch it. And I just, anyway, I wonder if it could funnel some of those people, because if a child was going to school in DC and they decided to move, for a temporary time to Southern Maryland or to Baltimore with relatives to get out of a living situation or a safer health situation, whatever, maybe we could find them that way, or at least get to children. Does that make any sense? Maybe I'm grabbing at straws, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways that we can try to reach people, and you're right. Like, part of it, it's when I say missing, I mean just we don't know exactly where they are, and there was no protocol for that, right? So no one really knew what to do when a student didn't show up or didn't log on to Zoom for a week and a half. Like, there was no protocol on what were you supposed to do with that. And part of it is because there's not really an attendance policy either for online learning. So, if a student doesn't show up, like, there's not really a way to check anyway. So there is now the DME and CFSA and the schools have worked on a protocol on how to identify and making sure that there's visits and those types of things. And I know there have been requests from through the community schools for those schools that can to do knock on door visits, and it's not the best of ideas all the time to do that type of thing, but like, how do you actually make that happen? Especially with families that are may not be working right now and don't have the funds to pay for a cell phone, or don't have the funds to pay for all of the things that you need in order to keep in contact. I mean, there's lots of different questions and things. So,
is there someone in DC schools, or I'm not sure how the infrastructure goes, whose job it would be in this case to reach out to the homeless shelters? I'm curious if an organization like Covenant House is actually not where kids are missing because they're actively making sure they're connected to their schools, or if that's a place that we just don't know.
There has been active outreach to the places where we know families are, whether or not that's in a shelter or in a hotel or if that's somewhere else. So those folks are being connected with resources and that type of thing throughout the emergency. So it's sometimes the ones that are housing insecure rather than homeless, right? So if someone was sleeping at their aunt's house, and now the entire family's home and they can't do that anymore, so where do they go? Like, what does that mean? I think that's the larger challenge than the folks that are already getting government services. We can identify where those folks are a little bit easier. It's the housing insecure people that I'm focused on too. It's trying to figure out how do we reach them and how do we get them the resources they need.
Oh, John Paul, question for you. Some other outreach that comes to mind is within the faith-based community, other community centers, organizations that are community-based to help raise awareness. And I'm wondering if efforts have been made that way. I know Donnell's on the line, and I know he's been working directly with all of their clients at Life Pieces to Masterpieces. So maybe if there's some learning we can get from community-based orgs as well as the faith-based community.
Yes. I mean, I'm trying to think, so yes, I mean, there's always going to be opportunities for folks to be involved. I think the deputy mayors are the ones that are sort of leading the charge of how to distribute these resources. So
Yeah.
if you have those contacts with whichever deputy mayor's office that you have, certainly reach out to them and say, hey, how do I help? What do you need? Those types of things. I think that can be super helpful. I think especially folks like Faith Gibson Hubbard, who is the executive director of Thrive by Five. She's doing some really great work, especially for our younger kids, and so that would be a great place to start. And she knows things. She knows sort of who to connect and that type of thing too. So I would start with her, and then if you want to reach out to me too, I can try to help connect people too.
Yeah, what I hear is that really there isn't a one cohesive system to really reach out everybody. It's bits and pieces, and maybe that's what needs to be devised, so all of the information comes into one central place. And what I mean information is really all of that data collected that maybe the schools have. I work at Oyster Adams, and we've done this wonderful pyramid because every teacher called their students. So we have the information of the entire, so it's, as Vanessa said, one cannot do it alone. Really, it's a team. But it was a very successful campaign also to identify families that were food insecurity and house insecurity. So at a very local level, we are able to do that. Anyway, just a thought that maybe really from the city perspective, we need to create one larger system and just bring everybody into it and observing things that have already worked, systems that have already worked. And also, Lissa, adding to your list of faith and community, also the kitchen. I think that a lot of people that are housing insecurity, food insecurity, that is one place that we can go and do a survey, at least, that everybody that is going to where they are going to go for food, have somebody there just making that research.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real grassroots approach as well as a grass tops approach in working with leadership like the DME and the DC Education Fund. That's the fundraising mechanism of it. But you also mentioned, Sylvia, too, looking outside of the district for good templates of how other communities are doing this work and doing it well, or are challenged, how we can all learn from each other. And I know a friend of mine is now with the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. They're formally based out of Ohio, but they do work all across the country. And this is a group that sets policy and creates programming around broadband access, public access, having personal devices. And they're working in many communities across the country now. She did put me in touch with someone in DC, but it's more for workforce development. But it just shows that her organization doesn't have or hasn't received any contact yet with leadership in DC to help. But that might be a place, John Paul, that you might want to suggest that administration goes to take a look. And again, it's the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. They do this work all the time, and they're doing immediate COVID-19 responsive activity right now.
Oh, sorry, I can't tell who's getting ready to talk.
Go ahead.
I thought there was a gadget a button where we could raise our hand, but anyway. Okay, I'm going to go back. John Paul, two things. Everyone, I didn't mean to sound like I was correcting your term missing, because they are missing, but I just started thinking about milk carton kind of missing. So I'm sorry if it sounded like I was correcting you. I don't tend to do that as people that know me. I try not to. Anyway, when you mentioned that cell phones, perhaps that's a choice for a family if they're putting a certain number of dollars towards food or towards the cell phone, maybe the cell phone is going to lose. And I wonder if there are any organizations that have board members from Verizon or Sprint or some of the big companies that could go to the companies and say, don't let these cell phones disappear, you know, because of financial situations right now. I know they're doing it with rent and with some food, but I wonder if anyone has access to telephone company board members that could get this started. So families don't have to give up their cell phones because they're so crucial for so many different things.
I think some of the cell phone carriers are, you know, pausing elimination of service for a little while, but you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that the sorry, that was my delivery of something. Who knows what it was? That there is those bills are still going to come due at some point. So, you know, we don't necessarily want to put it into a big spiral type thing for individual families either. So, yeah, I mean, it's just all the things, right? But I think you're right.
Hi, everybody. I'm Magdalena. I'm a mom and a teacher. I just had two thoughts because these seem like two totally different discussions as far as, you know, accessibility to devices and unaccounted for children. I just wanted to point that out. And the thing about the devices is that you know, I've learned that you have to ask for what you want. And these gazillionaires out there are probably ready and willing to donate. They just have to be asked. So I don't know who is in charge of that, you know, who goes to Facebook, who goes to Amazon, who goes to Apple, who goes and says, you know, we need 300,000 phones, boom. And so I don't know, we could talk about it for a long time, but there seems to be just kind of a few simple steps. And then as far as the unaccounted children, I wonder what the social workers in each school are doing. You know, presumably in DC, every public school has a social worker or psychologist or maybe even just a guidance counselor. But those are the point people, as far as grassroots is concerned, those are the people that know their students, and they will be able to find them most likely, you know, with help. But I mean, I think they would be the point people. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah, and certainly those folks absolutely are, like, you know, it is not like school personnel are just sort of like, oh, well, we don't know where those people are and you know, ignoring them. Everyone is actively trying to identify them and find them, you know, and make sure that they're okay. I mean, it very well may be that, you know, they've decided to shelter in Maryland and aren't, you know, paying attention to the DC thing, or they've decided to go home and take care of their grandmother in, you know, wherever the heck, you know, we just want to make sure that we know, we can identify where every person is, just to make sure, right? And I think that's the responsible thing for us to do. And there are still folks that we don't know yet, and so we're still, you know, focused on making sure that we can find them.
I want to just kind of pivot back a little bit to the things that we as an arts organization might have more direct influence over. You know, obviously it's obvious, but the fact that we can't gather in any public spaces right now is so hard. I think there's going to be like you said, John, we have to just sit with accepting what we can't solve right now. But the article brought up some things that I thought you could think about when we get back to some kind of socializing again, knowing it'll be different, knowing it'll be limited, but the platforms that you choose to use are inherently more accessible or than others. And so I was thinking about this, like, if kids could get to a library or get to somewhere where they can access internet again, for example, Zoom, you don't have to, Zoom is more accessible than Teams, right? You have to have a Microsoft account or be associated with one in order to get to Teams, whereas Zoom you don't. So there were some interesting things about, you know, even Facebook and Instagram require you to have an account. So those were some interesting things to think about. For what it's worth, it feels like a small thing right now and a thing we have to wait for, but.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Vanessa, because when we think about how we're all pivoting and going to transition into what is a hybrid of experiential learning, because we're going to have to be able to pivot to whatever we can do. DCPS, for example, is using Microsoft Teams and Canvas. So, or Canva, excuse me, at Canva, yeah. And so I think the idea of Zoom, there's challenges around it, but it is free and accessible. The idea of relying upon our libraries as those community-based centers is very important. I know Ellen Riordan is not on today, but we've had friends from library on in past Zoom chats. And for us, I liked you bringing it kind of home, like what can we as the arts and humanities education community do now to tee up what we can, what we've already started to do this month, because I know all of us have worked really hard on that, what it's going to look like through the summer, and then also what that fall looks like. And we do need to be planning that now. And the collaborative will be having some announcements very soon about what our office, our Arts and Humanities for Every Student program will look like as we transition through and move forward into the new school year. But relying upon community centers makes a lot of sense because we can, and libraries, because we can do that work as a community together now. And we're going to need to think about, what does summer look like? The school year is going to end in a month. Let's think about what summer looks like. For those of us that normally have summer camps, what are you doing? How are you pivoting that work now? How can we get those opportunities to as many students as possible? Because the drop-off will be even far greater than it is at the moment and during the summer.
I also wanted to jump in and sort of piggyback off of the library conversation. I'm working with the DC libraries to actually have them present at one of these equity conversations, hopefully in the next few weeks, because the library has so many resources for free. Just doing preliminary research about, what kind of resources the library has to offer right now. It's super easy to get a library card digitally. And actually, DC students that have their DC1 Metro cards, their Kids Rate Free Metro cards, they can actually use the number on that card as a library card. And through that, that this has to assume they have internet access, but if their family does have internet access, then they're able to check out books for free online. They're able to check out audiobooks. So I think definitely tapping into the libraries and whatever next step we move into that might look like public spaces being open, but in a very limited way, really hoping that the libraries can be that source of, kind of being on the ground and trying to figure out how to give, opportunities and access to people who normally don't have it. I also just wanted to share out something that I also came across online and never thought of. For a lot of people, Zoom chatting, video chatting, it can be really uncomfortable because you're sharing your home and you can really start to see the differences in class amongst maybe educators and other students. And that's a big issue. A lot of people feel embarrassed or don't want to be a part of these Zoom chat conversations because they have to share their screen. And so I've heard of people just, I think Zoom has the ability, you can change backgrounds or something. You can add these like really silly backgrounds, but maybe that's something to consider if you're working with students, to encourage them to do that if their parents don't feel comfortable. But Lissa's already using it right now. So just things like that, I think, it can be really hard. Yes, Vanessa, I love it. I think it can be really hard because there's so much, kind of going back to what John Paul is saying, like there's so many issues, there's so many disconnects in areas that we can't necessarily solve right now. And so I think a lot of it is like, you know, sometimes having these equity conversations can be so frustrating because you come out of it saying, oh my gosh, I thought we just had one thing that we needed to work on, but now there's like 15 other things on top of that. And so I think it's sort of finding this balance of like being aware of these different issues and being aware of the divides and the inequities, but also just trying to figure out what can you do with the resources that you have. And maybe changing the background on your Zoom is a way that you can do that if you're working directly with students and parents. So I just wanted to.
Do you think also, would you advise, I would say if you're having that kind of, well, if you're setting up something via Zoom or a platform that also has virtual backgrounds with the public, and therefore you don't know who may or may not feel that way, just like putting in the instructions that is an option and how to do it, is that a good idea?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think again, like for a lot of people using these online platforms are really new, and they might not even be aware that it's an option, or also encouraging people, you know, if they want to hide their screens, they can, and letting them know how they can do that. But I think definitely taking the opportunity just to let people know, hey, these are your options for how to use this conference call. These are things you can do, and please feel comfortable to, you know, hide your screen or add these backgrounds if that's what makes you feel more comfortable.
It's such a good point, Clarissa. It's so important. We touched upon that this week, right, Sylvia, with our teaching artists. You know, now that they're sharing their space, their personal space with students and families. But it is true. A lot of focus is on what surrounds you. You know, I'm talking right now, but you're probably, of course, I've looked at what everyone's got. We talked about Sylvia's wine bottles in previous conversations. You know? So, right. But it does set up that inequity. And because we don't know where everyone is mentally, socioeconomically, maybe it's even not only, or in it, maybe it's even a step beyond sharing resources on how you can elect to present yourself how you want. Oh God, dare I even say this drastic measure? What if we make a requirement that if you participate in a certain activity, everyone has the same setting, you know, and we will show you how to get there. Just a thought. That way there's no distractions. It's sort of the controversy around student uniforms, all in a very different way. I know that. But I just wanted to punt that out there, playing devil's advocate a little bit, because that was the intent of uniforms and equity, right? You know, do we want to suggest that? It's kind of strange and ironic because we're the creative community. But I just wanted to put it out there as something.
Piggybacking off of that, like sharing your pronouns, like
right, exactly.
when you're introducing yourself on these virtual chats would be important too. I saw someone have their name and their pronouns underneath, like in their Zoom screen.
Yeah.
So we might want to switch to that too.
That's a very good point.
And you know, Lissa, some businesses do that. They require that you would have either the same or actually not have a background, just your name on the screen. I think for all of those reasons, for the professionalism of it and not to have distractions, as you said, or judgment, really, to bring that same level of comfort. So
we all can't help it. Psychologically, we judge. We subconsciously do this. This is how we identify and relate. That's relations. You know, I did a lot of work around awareness of women and different health issues. You know, like hair loss sometimes was something I had focused on one point. And I had worked with a researcher at Harvard University who talked about that very issue of within the first 5 seconds of meeting someone, you frame their face, you look at them, you identify them here first, and you start to navigate down. So whatever is going on here is very important, and you don't even realize it. You know, this is what everyone does. So this background is really important. Oh gosh, these are things that don't even relate to but are so important to our work, aren't they? Yeah.
I guess so we have about 10 minutes left, and I guess I just wanted to pivot unless anyone has anything else to say, but I think kind of what we were all touching on is there's so much to solve, and I think there's the feeling of powerlessness in all of this. You know, there's so many issues. All of us are idealistic people. All of us are in this work because we care about the cause, but there's so many complex and complicated issues that we just don't have, you know, the means to solve right now. So I think a lot of it is about setting realistic expectations for ourselves, for our communities. If you work with parents, setting realistic expectations for them. But I'm wondering, you know, is there anything that you guys have done to take care of yourselves? You know, are there any strategies that you've used to take your mind off of things, or just promoting self-care and self-preservation in this process as we talk about equity is so important, because we can't burn ourselves out, and we can't get too hard on ourselves about all these issues that we want to solve but don't have the means to now. So I just wanted to see if anyone has any self-care videos or strategies that they've been relying on during the times of social distancing and quarantine, when probably many of the things that we used to do, we can no longer do in the same way. So just wondering if anyone has any resources they want to share or strategies.
I'm here every day. I do that for me. It's that connection, you know, of like-minded people, it keeps me engaged and thinking of things that I can do, that I cannot do, but it's nice to have an adult conversation. Yeah. So thank you, Collaborative, for being here.
Thank you.
You join almost every day, so thank you for coming too. I am so overwhelmed by the news, especially what came out from our president's press conference yesterday. But I shared this on a previous Zoom chat, and I love like comedy, and like Seth Meyers basically is like getting me through this right now. But John Krasinski also has like a Some Good News network, and just sharing like the good that's coming from people now. So I've definitely watched those. So I'll put his YouTube channel there. But and then other self-care like bubble baths. I've had Zoom chats with other like college friends and stuff who I haven't seen in a while, and yeah, and I'm really thankful to have you guys as support more broadly, but like Lissa and Clarissa and others from our DC collaborative team are just like really supportive people. So it's not, oh, and I do weekly therapy appointments for sure. So I just wanted to share that too.
Yesterday, Capacity Interactive, which is a major arts marketing firm, consultants, they did a free 4.5-hour boot camp digitally. I just posted the link to it on YouTube. There was a ton of good information in that for everybody, but specifically, and unexpectedly, I think what the session I got the most out of was Jennifer Zaslow, who is an executive coach, did like a mindfulness exercise for everybody. It was very short, but it was very impactful. And it helped me flip some of my thoughts around my anxieties and concerns into positive ways of thinking about them. And it got me up and doing my yoga this morning again, which I'd kind of seriously slacked off on in amongst all this. So I just posted that link. There's a ton of useful info in there, but I would look at Jennifer Zaslow's section. It's probably like 10-15 minutes long. It was helpful.
Hello, everybody. This is Linda. Anacostia Community Museum. I just want to pivot off of something what Tracey said. You know, I learned the hard way about those updates on the news. So this is what I decided to do. Just take my news at a chunk at a time, you know, with those updates. Then I turn it off to something I want to see, like a movie or that sort of thing, because it's almost too much at times. And the information seems to be really not accurate, you know. So I do that. And then I also, the museum has started, we're doing our Take Time Thursdays. And yesterday we did a session on just breathing, that people need to take time to breathe through this. So we did some breathing exercises. And also I would like to say something about the Asian Pacific Center. They have this something called a care package, and they have all these sound baths and these interactive art things that is really comforting. So check that out. If you Google Asian Pacific Center, they're part of the Smithsonian and care package. You see some of the amazing things they're doing. And we're going to have one of the artists on our Take Times Tuesdays. She's going to be on our program talking about it. So
thanks for sharing. I like hearing everyone's recommendations. I actually took this recommendation from my cousin, and I've been watching the Great British Baking Show. And at first I was like, this doesn't really sound like something I'd like. Like, it seems like it'd be boring, but I am into it. I love it. It's like really therapeutic. And unlike American competition shows, it's not like stressful. Like, it is, but they're not creating this like overly like pressure cooker environment where people just explode. And even when people mess up, the judges are like super supportive. So now I've been like baking myself too, because I've been inspired. But that's kind of what I've been doing as a means to just get a dose of positivity in the world and take my mind off of things, because like, as Linda was saying, it's almost too much at times, and we have to take care of ourselves. So that's what I've been doing.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I'll just say, I don't want to say, I'll say the situation is like super unfortunate because people are dying, but yeah, a lot of people have died from it. But however, yeah, I guess I would say take this, the opportunity to like do whatever you need to do self-care wise, like that you don't get to do throughout the year. I know our year is super packed when it wasn't quarantine. So I didn't get to sleep like normally. I didn't get to read books like I normally do because the daily schedule is like crazy. So everything you wanted to do, I guess you got time to do it. And I think that takes away from like the stress of what's going on. Like, do whatever you wanted to do that you didn't get to do before quarantine. Anything, cooking, exercising, whatever you didn't get to do on the regular, it's like really important. You have time to catch up. So I am lucky for that.
On every house project we have. So now I'm nervous. I'm feeling the anxiety more now than before because I'm running out of things to do.
I just moved. When this is all over, Vanessa, you can come to my house and help me paint. So that's good.
Yeah, what's up?
I'm sitting in an office that was our storage room before when this all started.
You know, Danelle, you raised like the most important point, like the big elephant in the room that I think we're all just scared to talk about, and that is people are dying. Loved ones are dying. People are sick. And when we want to, you know, to bring this conversation, not to put a huge wet blanket on it, but to be inspired, to be motivated by this situation and what we can do, and to be so fortunate that we're okay, all of us on the phone or on the Zoom chat. But some of us may have had loved ones who have passed on and are sick. Also, the inequities of this, yes, it impacts all of us. You know, the message that was coming out initially was COVID-19, it knows no boundaries. It impacts anyone of any age, any race, any ethnicity. Yeah, but then look at the statistics. Look at what is actually happening in our community in the District of Columbia. And that in itself just gets me very emotional too. It makes me super appreciative of and grateful for what I do have, and also that I can escape and not be in DC at the moment. I'm in a very rural place. I'm by myself and isolated. I don't have to step out to run my errands somewhere. I'm not in the same place that so many in the district are. And that's the biggest inequity of all of this, you know. And I think that it's really hard not to acknowledge it. And again, like I said, I feel bad also by being a wet blanket on this conversation, but that's the biggest piece of inequity that we can't control, you know. And again, we have to take control of what we can. And for us, that's the arts and arts education and equitable access to the arts and taking care of ourselves and be grateful that we can do all these things, you know, and work with a lot of integrity, humility, and transparency. You know, I had a really shitty day yesterday. Actually, I had a really shitty day on Wednesday afternoon after a meeting, and I had to take the day off yesterday. You know, that's what you got to do. You got to take care of yourselves.
Yeah, and you know, just to close out, yeah, I think this whole thing really is all about balance. Like Donnell said, people are dying. Disproportionately, we know it's Black and brown people, and that's very real. But then it's also about, okay, taking in too much of this information on a 24/7 basis can have negative effects on our health mentally and emotionally. And so it's all about balance and balancing being informed but not ignorant of what's going on. But I think this conversation that we had was really amazing and really thorough. And, you know, again, with these conversations, I come out thinking, wow, there's so much more work to be done than I initially thought going into it. But that's just the nature of equity and access. And I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I think we're going to wrap up here. But thank you all for sharing, and have a good weekend and take care of yourself. And we will hopefully see some of you guys next Friday at 11.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I keep saying guys. Okay.
Yeah.
Folks. I say folks. I try to say that.
Yeah.